Hello, everyone, and welcome to Recharge the Podcast. I'm David Coe. Today, my guest is a New York Times bestselling author, an award-winning journalist who has been on a mission to answer a question that affects all of us. What does it take to feel like our lives have meaning and purpose? It's her research which has uncovered something profound, that at the heart of our mental health, our relationships, and our sense of well-being is a fundamental human need. That is the need to matter, to feel valued for who we are, and to know that we add value to the world around us. Her new book, Mattering, explores how this one concept can transform not just how we parent, but how we show up at work, in our communities, and really for ourselves. So let's recharge with Jennifer Wallace. Hey, Jennifer, how are you? And thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, David, I'm so happy to be here.
I am so excited. And I got to tell you, I'm so excited because your book is here. Yeah.
You.
Just came out. But I like to start all of my podcasts off with all the guests that we see, just really asking a simple question. And this question really came off a book I wrote that's called Recharge. The premise for this whole podcast is to really think about your mental health like a battery, a phone battery. So I'd like to start by asking you, how's your battery and why?
I would say my battery is at an 85%, which I'm frankly very proud of. I think a book launch can really drain you. But I have learned actually in researching this book how to bolster my battery so that it's not a constant drain.
Ah, lovely. Where did this second book really all begin for you? Did it begin during the first book? Did it begin after? Like, just walk us through that whole story and narrative.
So the first book, Never Enough, was about achievement culture. And it was about how so many young people today are being crushed by the pressure, feeling like whatever they do is never enough. And I went in search of the kids who were doing well despite the pressure to see what they had in common. What did their parents focus on at home? What was school like? How did they see their role in the wider community? And what I found was that the kids who were doing well despite the pressure felt like they mattered for
Hmm.
who they were deep at their core, away from their achievements and successes. And as I was researching that book, I kept talking with families all around the country. And both the kids and their parents, so many kids who were not thriving, were saying that they felt like they only mattered when they
Hmm.
achieved, when they had a certain level of popularity, when they made the A team. And so many adults I was interviewing talked about how they felt like they didn't matter. So, what I realized was we are living in a world that while our kids were crying out to matter, to feel
Hmm.
valued for who they were, the adults in their lives were also feeling this lack of mattering. And so, really, I wish I had written this mattering book for adults first,
Oh,
because
wow.
it's very hard to let young people feel like they matter when the adults in their lives feel like they don't matter.
Jennifer, thank you for that. Hey, one follow-up to that, and I want to read something actually from the introduction, if you don't mind.
Please.
And I want to go back actually just a moment. And in the introduction, you wrote, Mattering is the story we tell ourselves about our place in the world as in. Do people value and appreciate me? Or do I go unnoticed? Do I truly belong, or am I moving through the world alone? Does my life make a difference to others, or would it matter more if I weren't here? I had to go back and read that a couple of times because I know you're so intentional with your wording. And, can you just kind of walk us a little through this introduction as well?
Yeah, so let me start by explaining mattering is not a nice to have feeling. It is a deep, essential human need. And researchers define it as feeling valued and having an opportunity to add value in the world.
Hmm.
So to our earliest ancestors, mattering to the band, mattering to the tribe meant survival, support, protection. Feeling like we didn't matter, being cast aside was certain death. So we have evolved to be wired to seek mattering. After the
Hmm.
drive for food and shelter, it is the need to matter. that drives human behavior for better or for worse. So when we feel like we matter, we show up to the world fully. We want to engage, connect,
Yeah.
contribute. But when we are made to feel like we don't matter, we suffer. And so those questions that you were reading, those really get to the core of, am I valued?
Yeah.
Do I add value here? Or am I going through this life alone?
Oh,
And those are the questions that really are the root of mental health in us, knowing we are valued and knowing how we add value to the world around us.
and when you put this together with what you just said a minute ago about, maybe of having the book to adults first and then to kids, can you just kind of like, is that if you could take back it and kind of do it all over again, is that how you would have started it and gone with adult? Hmm.
Absolutely. So I discovered the concept of mattering, which, by
Mm.
the way, not my idea. It's been studied since the 1980s, but it's been locked away in the ivory tower. So Never Enough was the first book to put it in the hands of people who could use it. Um, it was like a year or two into my research that I found this idea of mattering as the
Mm.
antidote to so much of the pressure. But what I also found in the research, and why I wish mattering had come first, is because our children's resilience rests on the resilience of the adults in their lives. And
Mm.
adult resilience rests on believing we matter, that
Oh,
we
so
matter to
true.
the people around us, that we matter on this earth, that we add value to the world in positive ways. So it is hard to make a child matter. It
Mm.
is hard to act as a first responder to our kids' struggles when we ourselves feel like we don't matter. We just don't necessarily show up every day with the same bandwidth, the same battery that we do when we know we matter. That's what feeds us.
Oh, we could just go on and on just on that, but I do want to talk about some of the linkages that you also make in the book about the mental health crisis that's with us right now, and you write about this in such a clear and articulate way about that connection between mattering and what's happening around people's mental health. But you actually took this even one step further than I've seen others take it. And you said we're not just simply living through a mental health crisis, it's a social health crisis. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Thank you for picking up on that. So, we tend to individualize our suffering. We tend to, when we're feeling anxious and depressed, we tend to think we're the problem.
Mm.
But really, with this book, I wanted people to know that there is a context in which we are all living that is a social health crisis. So the reason we are feeling lonely is not because there is something wrong with us. The reason we are feeling lonely is because our social connections in this world have come apart. When our parents decades ago were raising us, when they were living, there was, a social contract at work where
That's
people
right.
worked for decades and were valued. There was a social contract in our neighborhood that we looked out for each other. There was, we were a more religious society. And while
Mm.
that is not a panacea, it certainly created an ecosystem in which we could have these social connections. It was an ecosystem of mattering. That ecosystem has eroded.
Mm.
And so, what we are struggling with right now, our mental health crisis is rooted in a social health crisis. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I love how you kind of wrapped it with this social contract. When I think about, even if I keep pulling down the string we put in the workplace about mattering, or essentially at times the absence of it and how it shows up, whether it's with individuals, like you were saying, whether it's in workplaces, which has become the fabric for so many of us and our communities now. It's like we find more community in our workplace than we do in our neighborhoods, I find. Are you seeing that as part of the problem as well? Or, like,
Yes.
how do you think about that?
No, David, I'm so glad you brought this up. So, what I write about in the book, I have a chapter on mattering at work, but really a lot of the book is sort of a leadership type book. Uh, I cite researchers who call the workplace, mattering in the workplace, as the long arm of the job,
Hmm.
meaning that what happens at work doesn't stay at work. It spills over into our family life, into even our civic engagement, our relationships with people. So if we are going to a workplace for 8, 10, 12 hours a day that makes us feel like we don't matter, it is hard for us to show up for the young people in
So
our
well
lives
said.
who rely on us, right? It's hard for us to have the bandwidth to be the
That's
first
right.
responders to their struggles. There's something called the crossover spillover model, where what happens in our workplace spills over into other domains of our lives.
Mm,
I often think about workplace disengagement, which I'm sure you know as a leader is at a 10-year low. Something
yeah.
like 70% of employees are reporting they feel disengaged at work. In my research, I have found disengagement not to be sort of a synonymous with maybe a lack of caring or laziness. Rather, disengagement, in my mind, is a coping strategy for feeling like you don't matter at work. So if
Mm,
you feel like you don't matter at work, that is a painful, painful feeling. So what do you do to protect yourself? You disengage from the work. And what happens when you're disengaged at work? You show up and you're disengaged in other parts of your life. Again, at home, there's something called proximal separation where
mm,
parents come home after a long work day and they are in the same room as their kids. So they're proximal
mm.
to their children, but they're separated emotionally because they're playing over incivility they may have experienced at work, or a lack of mattering or feeling invisible, so they can't really be that source of support that they wanted for their kids. And researchers have found it even extends into our civic engagement, that
Mm.
when you feel like you don't have a voice at work, you are less likely to engage civically in healthy ways. You are less likely to show up at a school board meeting or a local event to raise your voice, to believe that you have some agency in the world around you. And instead, you might show up in ways that are not healthy, in shouting at people, in road rage, in online attacks, in
Sure.
political extremes. These are desperate attempts to say, I'll show you I matter. So, mattering at work is I believe, the most important lever we can pull if we want to protect our youth and the social fabric of our communities.
And one of the things I really appreciate you calling out that is that, sometimes we may, as in the workplace especially, say, oh, they're not engaged. And you just said that is not a form of laziness. Just like at sometimes, if we talk about our mental health at work, it's not a sign that your culture is soft. I try to always kind of help people understand those things can make your culture stronger. And part of the things I think sometimes we can do as leaders or others is to kind of listen first and speak second, so that people feel more heard. And that's just like sometimes it's these small steps where you can feel that you matter in some of these situations, whether it's at work or at home.
Well, you make the argument that I found in the research, which is that making employees feel like they matter, it's not just the right thing to do, it's good for the company's bottom line.
That's right.
Engaged employees are more creative, they're more productive, they're more collaborative. And so this, mattering at work is not some soft, nice to have thing. It's good business.
Yeah, for all
So
those CFOs out there, you heard it first, okay? It will help your bottom line. I want to move a little bit to the core, and I don't want to give too much away here, obviously, in your book. But here's one thing I want to call out, and I love how you talked about the mattering core, and I'd love for you to just explain that to our listeners and viewers. Like, what is it, and why is it so important?
So, what I describe as the mattering core are actions we could take to strengthen our sense of mattering, just like we would
Mm,
our physical core. And so, researchers, as I mentioned, have been studying mattering for decades now.
mm,
And there are ingredients to making us feel like we matter and making those around us feel like they matter too. And I've put it under an umbrella that I call the SAID framework,
mm,
SAID. And that stands for significance, appreciation, feeling invested in, and
mm.
feeling dependent on. So I
Mm.
could give you, yeah, I could unwrap that a little bit for you if helpful. So, what does it mean to feel significant? Yes, we feel significant at a milestone birthday. We feel
Mhm.
significant when we are, receive, an award
Yeah.
at work for good work. But we as human beings, we crave to matter in the everyday. What does
Mm,
it look like to appreciate someone in a way that feeds a sense of mattering? So
mm.
let's say you have a colleague who is always great at organizing after work drinks for the group. Instead of saying to your colleague, thank you so much for, another great get together, a way to really enforce their sense of mattering, reinforce their sense of mattering, is to appreciate them for who they are.
Mm.
Thank you for being the community builder of our department.
Wow.
Because of your efforts, we are such a stronger team. I so appreciate you. So it's appreciation that appreciates the doer, not just the deed. Feeling invested in is just
Oh,
knowing that there's someone there who is invested in your goals, who is there to support you through setbacks. It's the colleague or the friend who calls you before the big meeting
oh
to
yeah.
say you can do this. We've talked about it. Don't forget to say this. So you really feel like someone is in the ring along with you. And then finally, feeling relied on and dependent on in the workplace, that is feeling trusted. It is knowing that your team is relying on you. You are not replaceable. You are appreciated and depended on for the unique person that you are. So those are really the ingredients to mattering in any domain, whether it's in your home, in your neighborhood, in your workplace.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good and so easy to remember, right? For all of us. And thank you for explaining that. And thank you for something we can kind of continue to go back and utilize in our own toolkits going forward. Right before we started taping, you and I were just talking about how to make yourself a priority, or sometimes how we don't prioritize ourselves. And something I really appreciated was in the book, you really talked about how we need to treat ourselves like a priority. What are some of your own routines? We'd love to hear, or practices when it comes, whether it's to, I don't know, sleep, mindfulness. What are some of those things for you that are kind of like non-negotiable, right, in your life to keep your own battery charged?
Well, I will tell you, this was very hard for me. But in order to really feel like you matter, you have to matter to yourself.
Mm,
I think as a woman in particular, we are socialized to put our needs last if they even make it on the list. And I will say, as a woman, as a caregiver of three children, that is something that I have long struggled with. But in doing this research, I know how important it is. And so I've come up with a few things that I do to reinforce a sense of mattering in myself. The
mm,
first thing I do is every morning while I'm brushing my teeth. So that's kind of my cue to think about this. I think about what is one small need that I need to meet for myself today in order for me to show up and be my best self.
mm.
And for me, it's often waking up early and having a cup of coffee alone, not responding to someone else's agenda or to-do list, just time carved out for me.
Good for
Uh,
you.
for another woman I interviewed, she said she takes a 1 hour meditative, mindful walk every single day, whether it's rain, snow, whatever. She takes that walk, and that is how she is able to show up as her best self. So I
Mm.
would say that one practice has changed a lot. It has changed my view what it is to matter to yourself. So it's not to put yourself on the list and meet that need after your entire to-do list is done, after everybody's needs are met. Instead, it is to prioritize yourself in a radical way, even when you're in the middle of a to-do list, even when everybody else's needs are coming before your own, to carve out that time to matter to yourself.
I love that. I love that. I too have worked really hard on that, and it's been a work in progress. I used to wear the lack of sleep like a badge of honor. And I realized how bad it was for me because it wasn't just, affecting my day to day. It was really affecting my ability to be present around other individuals and give them my attention, whether it was other coworkers, family, or friends. It's not really fair to them. And now I really try hard, and I'm not always there. And it's a struggle where I don't let the phone be the last thing I look at when I go to bed. And I don't let it be the first thing I look at in the morning. Kind of like what you're saying, sending that email, because I find myself then just kind of in that go moment. And so I do love how you kind of just talk about take a moment for yourself, and that's something I'm trying to do as well.
What I have found with mattering and what I love about it when it comes to this idea of mattering to ourselves is that we are just inundated with input all day long. I
Yes.
mean, you as the head of a huge company, inundated with incoming and the demands of outcoming, things that you have to respond to every day, that it's easy to get into a kind of autopilot where you
100%.
are, right, just need to get through your day.
Nailed it.
What mattering does is that it forces you to look up and notice the people around you, and notice, as you were doing with your lack of sleep, notice how your lack of sleep is impacting people around you. So what I noticed about myself was that when I wasn't mattering to myself, when I was just supercharged and going at 100 miles an hour, that sometimes I was not maybe as I don't want to say polite because I consider myself
Right.
always polite, but I wasn't as responsive, and
Mm,
maybe my emails were shorter, maybe my responses were shorter. And so part of mattering is noticing how we are sort of exuding our own energy around others. So really what I've come to realize is that self-care is other care,
oh,
that
so good.
self-care is the way for us to show up as our best selves.
I love
And there
that.
is no way to be your best self if you are not a priority in your on your to-do list.
And if we were to just now kind of go back to the workplace a little bit, when we look at like what creates a healthy workplace, how does mattering really look like in a healthy workplace?
Mattering is in the small moments. It
Mm,
is it is not just in the big moments of an employee's experience, moving in, being hired, onboarded, moving up, moving out, but in the everyday. It is in really small moments. One simple way of doing this is just to connect employees to their impact, closing the loop, saying, this project did, because
that's
of this
so good.
project, we made this amount of money, we served X number of people. This is the ripple effect of your work. So
Mm,
connecting employees to the impact within the company, but also outside the company and
mm,
even to society.
mm.
Because of your work, here is how we are making the world a better place. That to me is a one really easy, not easy, but a strong way of enforcing a sense of mattering.
And do you see this changing in your mind, or does some of the narrative change depending on if you're like fully, if you're all together, if you're hybrid, or if you're remote? How does it shift at all, or does it matter more if you're one over the other?
It's a really good question. And luckily, I've looked at workplaces that span the spectrum. And these actions are just as relevant in the workplace as they are virtual, remote. I will say with remote workers, you need to be especially mindful and careful,
Mm,
and more deliberate, because there is less interaction. So, a mattering in the workplace, there's more interaction, there's more room for repair if someone feels like they don't matter. There's more room to connect employees to their impact. So, for remote workers, it does require more intention, but it requires intention across the gamut.
yes. Speaking of intention, I was just spending some time prior to our conversation with one of our architects in the company. And you also talk about architects of mattering. And I love that term, and I would love to understand a little bit more about you call on your readers, and this is what I appreciate. You call on us to kind of become the architects of mattering in our own lives. What does that look like, and how do we just start?
I love that you asked me that question. What I will say is if you are, let's say you are struggling with a first step, the
Mm,
simplest first step you can take is to send a text that says, if it weren't for you, dot, 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 to a
mm,
friend. If it weren't for you, dot, 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 I wouldn't have had the courage to go for that job interview.
I'm gonna do that now.
Thank you for believing in me, even when I can't believe in myself. How lucky I am to have you. Let's say you don't have someone like that in your life that you can text, that your relationships feel a little bit hollowed out. The fastest way to feel like you matter is to remind other people in your life why they do. And that could be as simple as going down to the cafeteria in your workplace and thanking the man or woman who always hands you your food with a smile and saying, sometimes life is a little hard, but I want you to know your warmth, it just radiates. You are such a positive force in this world. I just wanted you to know. So it is taking that first step. We are all one decision and one action away from feeling like we matter again. If you are struggling with, let's say so many people are struggling with a sense of purpose today. I interviewed so many people around the country and I developed a really simple formula
Mm,
for living a more purposeful life. And it is this: identify a genuine need in your home, in your workplace, in your neighborhood, in your community,
mm,
and then use your time or your talent or your treasure to meet that need.
mm,
So some of us are so wrapped up in trying to find purpose with a capital P that I think it is much easier to find your purpose by every day choosing to live more purposefully.
yeah,
And something that I've been challenging myself to do since researching this book, and I don't always get it right, but it is certainly something I strive for, is to imagine everyone I meet on the street, whether it's someone I know or whether it's a stranger, imagine them with a sign around their neck saying, "Tell me, do I matter?" We can all answer that question with a warm smile, with eye contact, by pointing out how they matter. So we can all be agents and architects of mattering simply by reminding people in our lives why they matter.
In addition to just to being a journalist and a writer that you are, you're also a parent. So just as we go back to the parent angle with children, in fact, for anyone who doesn't know here, you were featured in our Calm app on our series for Moms with Love. And and for those of you who haven't heard it yet, you should definitely check it out. It's already had over 100,000 listens and growing. I think for, again, going back to the parenting part, so many of us feel that our worth is tied into how our children are doing. And if they aren't doing well, we blame ourselves. And so I would just love to go and try to get some of your thoughts about that.
So, some of the things that I learned in researching Never Enough and what I have come to realize in my own life is that my job as a parent is to set my child up to thrive in life, to
Yeah.
achieve in life. And what healthy strivers are able to do is to maintain this achievement and success over a lifetime because they have been able to uncouple their sense of self from external factors
Hmm.
like how they look, how much they're paid, et cetera, that they are able to maintain a steady sense of self-worth away from achievements. And so it gives us more confidence to reach for high goals and to recover more quickly from
Hmm.
setbacks.
Hmm.
I will say, I'm often asked, what if I have a child who is not achieving? How can I encourage them to achieve um, in healthy ways without crushing them? And what I say to those parents is that what we have to remember is that all children want to do well. In fact, all adults want to do well. All employees want to do well. So if someone isn't doing well, get curious, not furious. For a child, right? Take a look
I get
and
more
say,
furious, but thank you for that. Like,
right? Because what happens is when we get curious, we are able to maintain the connection. And in maintaining the connection is how we have true influence over study habits, over, how their work habits and all that. So I would say for a child to get curious, take a look at how their work gets done. Encourage them to ask for help with their teachers. If you get curious and not furious, if you focus on how the work gets done, then good grades actually do come. And I would say the same
I
in
love that.
adulthood. If you have people in your life that you are close to, get curious, not furious about their behaviors. Now that I understand mattering, when someone is acting odd or acting out or being uncivil, I often see it as rooted in a sense of not mattering.
Hmm.
So when we feel like we matter, we show up in positive ways. When we feel like we don't, we will do anything we can to force people to look at us to prove that we matter. So what I would say to people is, if there are people in your life who are acting out, to get curious and to meet that with compassion.
Oh, that's so good. I wanted to ask for all of our listeners too, who are now reading or have read your book, or want to go out and buy your book now. if there was something that they could do in a short amount of time, like 60 seconds,
Mhm.
to increase mattering or just to start, what piece of advice would you give them just to kind of get started or to do something kind of quickly?
Absolutely. So I hate journaling. I know how important it is to journal, but I spend my whole day writing, so I do not journal at night. But a small practice that I've instituted is before I go to bed, I ask myself two questions. When did I feel valued?
Huh.
And when did I add value? So knowing that mattering is made up of feeling valued and adding value,
I love that.
connecting to my own impact. And
Yeah.
it could be something small. I mean, there was one day when I was spending 10 hours at my computer writing, and the one little impact of where I added value was I was at the supermarket and I let somebody have the prime spot that was really mine to take.
Oh
And they
no.
like waved and they were so appreciative. And I mattered there. I added
Yeah.
value. I helped someone have a little bit of convenience in their life. So there are small little ways every day that we make an impact and we don't even notice it because we're going through life on autopilot. So
Mm.
there are so many ways that we matter. And just to take 30 seconds to think about those, that to me is a very quick way of connecting to your impact and connecting to your sense of mattering.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. And that's something all of us could do. And it's really simple and easy to remember. We're almost out of time. And before we end, I would love to just ask you a couple of questions. And I don't call them a speed round because it's not really a speed round. But one of them first is just as you've written this book, how has this basically changed how you see the world? How has it changed and altered the way you think?
Oh my gosh, it has made my life richer in so many ways. I now see everything through the lens of mattering because I know this need is going unmet in millions and millions and millions of people. And just helping people connect to their impact, letting them feel like they matter, boy, is it powerful. Boy, does it deepen relationships. So it has changed my life in profound ways.
Amazing. Is there something about you and so much you've done so many interviews, you've done so obviously, but is there something about you that might still surprise people?
Maybe it is that the way I matter to myself is by getting up at 4 a.m.
What?
and I know it's not for everyone. I know it's not for everyone, but I wake up at 4 and it's like a meditative time for me. And I
Hmm.
absolutely love it. It's how I've written my books. It's how I give to myself. It's how I matter to myself. I also go to bed early, David. I am
Okay.
not a martyr. I love 8 hours of sleep. But I do love waking up early and I love giving myself that gift and starting my day every day with a gift to myself.
Ah, beautiful. Uh, you inspire and continue to inspire so many people. Who inspires you?
Oh, so many people. I would say maybe my friend Ina Garden, who is a
Mhm.
cookbook author.
Yeah.
And what inspires me about her is that she has a very big job, but she takes her personal life and her fun and her play as seriously as she does her work. And she has shown me that work is easy and fun and play is hard, and you
Hmm.
need to prioritize it. And so she has taught me how to prioritize play.
I love that. And then lastly, what is your favorite way to recharge?
Calling my friends.
Ah, so good. That's one thing I do too.
I mean, I will tell you what one of the big takeaways for me in all of this 7 years of research is that our resilience rests on the depth and support of our relationships, relationships that feed a sense of mattering in us. And so we often think resilience is lighting a candle or taking a bubble bath, and those are great stress reducers, but nothing provides the resilience that deep, nourishing relationships that feed mattering do.
Hmm.
So I think the two of us are onto something here by recharging with our relationships.
Yes, yes, absolutely. 100%. So Jennifer, I got to tell you, thank you again so much for joining us here today. You know, I can speak on behalf of all of us, the work that you continue to do to help people understand that you don't have to really achieve our way into mattering. Thank you for writing this book. It's going to be an absolute must read for everybody, for our listeners and viewers out there. Please, please go out there and go pick up Mattering. I got to tell you, it's something that, you're going to thank me after reading this book. And if you haven't read her first book, Never Enough, please do that as well. Okay, it's 2 for 1 here. Please get both of these, not just one of these. Read both of these. And and if you haven't heard of Jennifer's series on Calm, please listen to that as well. And it's all about mattering. So please give that a listen to as well. Thank you all again for listening. And remember, you matter to all of us here. And please remember to recharge, okay? Take care of yourselves. See you next time. Thank you, everyone.